Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're going to show you how to get into one of the most prestigious institutions in the country, the United States Military Academy at West Point. I'm excited because I believe there are few game changers out there in the world today, and getting into West Point, I firmly believe is one of them. Academically, professionally, financially, West Point will put you on a trajectory that will give you a significant head start in life. If you're a young person or if you're a parent, it will put your son or daughter on a trajectory that will change their course of their life. I firmly believe that. It has with me in going to an academy, and I believe it will for all of you. Our purpose today is to give you clarity on how to get in hopes that all of you will increase your chances of getting accepted. My name is Travis Whittick, founder of Academy Endeavors. Simply put, my job tonight is to help you get into West Point. And I get it. I understand. I was applying to the service academies 20 years ago. I remember the pain. I remember the unique complexities. And it's what motivated us. It's what motivated me to start Academy Endeavors. Today, as of 2024, we've guided hundreds of families through this process. 100% of them over the last 4 years have earned a congressional nomination. And in a world where there's about a 10% acceptance rate to get accepted, over 80% have earned an academy appointment. And so I stand before you humbly saying that because it has exceeded our expectations as to how well our clients have done. And we are humbled to be a part of their success. We believe we've learned what the academies are looking for. And in the limited time tonight, we're not going to hold back. We're going to give you as much in 1 hour as we possibly can, and we're going to give it to you straight up. We're going to be as honest as we can. So by next spring, if you're a rising senior, our goal is that a West Point appointment is in your hand, and you're holding that bad boy, and you are taking a picture in front of your house, putting it up on social media, one of the few and one of the proud. So let's do this. Let's jump in. One of the best ways that I believe I can serve you is to be honest. And we have to be honest about the bad news. It is a problem. It is a Mount Everest that we have ahead of us. Applying to West Point it's overwhelming. It's daunting. A lot of people give up before they even finish the entire application process. That's how bad it is. The process is long. From the SLE application opening in February of your junior year, which is right about now as I'm speaking, all the way until April 15th, which is when they plan to notify all applicants. That's about 15 to 16 months long. It's a long process. When you compare it to college, it's simple. When you compare it, let me say that again. When you compare it to college, the college process is simple, and this is much longer. It's a marathon, not a sprint. The process is complex. The typical college application these days are fairly simple. You write a few essays, you fill out the Common App, and you're done. If you don't believe me, we used to coach applicants through the college process. We don't anymore, even through the Ivy League process. Okay. And when you compare, I'll show you a picture of what we used to show them. And this is the academy process when you have the academies, nominations, and ROTC scholarships all on one slide. This is what it looks like. And when you compare that versus the college application process, you complete it. It takes about 2 to 3 months. You submit it before the deadline, and then everyone finds out around the same time. That's usually what happens. Essays, recommendation letters, Common App, resume, and you're done. But that's not the way the academy process is. So let's talk about some of the complexities. We're going to talk about that tonight. First, I also want to, before we get into the complexities, got a little bit ahead of myself. The process is not only long and complex, it's also competitive. Very competitive. So historically, there's about 10,000 people that apply. There's about 1,000 people. We're using round numbers. 10,000 people that apply. About 1,000 people are accepted each year. I can geek out on you why it's so low. The bottom line is the most important factor is that Congress has mandated the supply of appointments. West Point can only give out so many appointments each year. The enrollment has to be under 4,400 total, all 4 classes at any given time. So whereas in an age where colleges can build new buildings, expand their enrollment, as the demand increases and as the U.S. population has doubled in the last 50 years, the academies by law cannot. They are restricted from doing so. In fact, if they have about 1,400 appointment offers each year, 35% of those are taken right off the board from recruited athletes enlisted in prep school. So if you are a high school junior or a rising high school senior listening to this and you plan on applying, you had about, let's call it 1,000 in the class, okay, and you thought that was your window, but now even that has been taken down to 65% of it right off the board if you're trying to get directly in and not go to a prep school. Okay, so there's a limited supply and there's high demand, which leads to crazy acceptance rates. Okay, you're fighting with tons of people in your district and in the state and in your slate. We'll talk about that in a little bit, the congressional nominations, that make it incredibly difficult for you to get accepted. All right, so bottom line, applying to West Point will require every muscle fiber of your being and every brain cell in order to win. All right, so we're going to do 6 things tonight, and then I'm going to ask you to do 2 things in response. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to show a timeline, which we're showing here. We're going to talk through that. Second, we're going to show a framework for how West Point evaluates applicants called the whole candidate score. Third, we're going to share the unique parts about the West Point application process, including the field force rep interviews, the essays or the candidate statements, and the school official evaluations, otherwise known as recommendation letters. 4, we're going to talk about the daunting congressional nomination process. 5th, we're going to share a success story from one of our clients who was accepted to West Point. And lastly, 6th, we will do live Q&A. All right, now that's what I'm going to do. What I'm asking you to do tonight is 2 things. 1, engage. You won't enter an appointment by sitting back. Get as much of this out of this as you can. Grab a pen and a paper and take notes because you're going to need it. We're going to share a few slides, but not many. All right. Second is ask. When you think of a question, ask it in the chat. We'll get to the Q&A at the end so that you don't forget. Last time we did this, we had 25 questions, and we hope to have just as many tonight. We're not going to stop until we answer every question. That's our commitment to you. All right. So the first up, it's already on your screen. We're going to walk you through this timeline. On the left side, on the top, you'll see the academies. In the middle, you'll see nominations and ROTCs at the bottom. We put all these 3 buckets together because most applicants are applying to all 3, and it's tough to visualize how all 3, because they're all 3 are so different. At the beginning of second semester junior year, that's when SLE applications, that's West Point's summer seminar application, they open. They're open right now. They just opened in February 4th. They will stay open through summer of your rising senior. Summer through your rising senior year. Okay. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Let me go back a second. Your SLE application opens second semester of your junior year. Excuse me. It closes, and then you can attend SLE over the summer. That's what I meant to say. The real applications open over the summer. West Point last summer opened on June 1st. That's when the real application opens. Notifications happen, if you look there on the black line, notifications happen by April 15th. That's because National College Decision Day is May 1st, where most colleges require you to put down a deposit to ensure your seat in the class. So they want to get ahead of that. They usually notify everyone by April 15th to give you time to decide. And then basic training is at the end of June. If all goes well, you will be attending cadet basic training, CBT, or otherwise known as BEAST, the last week of June is when it begins. Now, what's the green line? Oh my goodness, the green line. What is that? The green line is August 31st, which is the Academy Endeavors suggested turn-in date for all your academy applications. Why is that a suggested application turn-in date? Because, listen to me clearly, West Point is a rolling admissions. That means the deadline is a distraction. The deadline up there on the top of your slide there is January 31st. That's when you must get your application complete. But we suggest a August 31st for 3 reasons. One, you're going to have a very busy senior year. We want you to get as much, if not all of it done before you start your senior year. 2, letters of assurance. To the cream of the crop in every class, West Point offers LOAs, otherwise known as letters of assurance, which effectively allow them to reserve a seat in the class for you contingent upon a congressional nomination and a medical clearance. That's huge. That's a huge win, but that's only given to those who submit early. And last, the Dodmer process. Oh, the medical process. It can take forever. But if you get completed with your application early, then you can have time on the back end to fight a medical waiver if you need it. 20% of all applicants get disqualified by Dodmer each year, and it's incredibly stressful. So one caveat to this, it is not ideal for every person to submit by this date on the green line. As one example, if you're failing your CFA in August, you probably want to hold off until you pass. But in general, the earlier the better. Get everything done before August 31st. One also unique aspect of the West Point application, there is no official submit button. So when we say submit, we mean green everything up before August 31st. You'll see your essays, you'll see your school official evaluations, you'll see, or essays otherwise known as candidate statements. You will see the CFA and you have to turn in videos. You'll see all that in the application portal. Green everything up as soon as possible. That's what I mean by submit, to be as clear as I can. Now that we've discussed timelines and when to submit your application, let's discuss how West Point submits. How West Point evaluates applicants. To that, we need to go to another picture. Picture is worth 1,000 words. And this is called the whole candidate score. Okay. What we have before us is a framework that can hint at how West Point evaluates applicants. Research from a government think tank called the RAND Corporation put something out called this, United States Service Academy Admissions. Okay. It's open to the public and it has divulged this process. And actually, West Point has been very open about their framework, the 60-30-10 framework, the whole candidate score. We're going to talk through this in a second. So for the next few minutes, let's dig into each of these aspects. Inside the academics category, which is the biggest category, 60% of the score, you'll see that SAT is worth 40%, and your transcript, we said GPA, but we're going to actually expand upon that, is worth, so SAT is worth 40%, or the ACT. You can take either one. They accept both. And the transcript is worth 20%. Inside of the leadership category, the community leadership category, is 3 things. Athletic activities, notice they carved that out as separate. At non-athletic activities is 10%, and the faculty appraisal, which is your school official evaluations, otherwise known as your recommendation letters. We're going to talk about that in detail as well. That's the 30%. And then the 10% left over is your physical aptitude, which they will test you on your CFA, your candidate fitness assessment. So let's talk a little bit more about each of these. All right, the SAT, ACT is the single biggest factor in increasing your whole candidate score. Think about that. Almost all colleges are doing away with the SAT or ACT. West Point is not. It is a requirement. So what does this mean for you? Getting a strategy about how to maximize your SAT or ACT score is going to be crucial. It's going to be very important. The average last year was a 1320 in climbing or a 31 ACT in climbing. Think about this. The last 4 years that we've been coaching applicants, those that have been admitted had an average SAT score of 1398. Those that were not, 1296. My point, I rest my case. My point exactly. Almost over 100-point difference between those who got in and those that didn't makes a huge difference. And keep in mind, one caveat, to add some color to this average, this mean of a 1320 on the SAT or a 31 on the ACT, that is including recruited athletes, which is 25% of the class. So what does that mean for you if you are on this call and you are not a recruited athlete? It means you must be even that much more above the mean in order to be competitive. Okay? Being in the 1400s should be your goal. Now, next, let's talk about the 20%, which on here is listed as GPA, but I want to expand on what that really means because it's not actually just your A's and B's. Okay, so we're going to expand on that here in a second. I need to show you another picture for that. We have another framework that will put this in context. We're going to go to PowerPoint, and we are going to go down to this. We call it the four-legged transcript stool. So think about this like a stool, and there's four legs to the stool. The first leg is your GPA or your class rank size. This is your performance in your classes compared to your peers. Okay? Think about this. They're going to take these four aspects. So it's not just I have a 3.98 and my friend has my friend in the neighboring high school has a 3.96, so I win. They're saying what this is showing you is not necessarily. It's not just 3.98 versus 3.96. There's a formula where they put these four aspects and they actually quantify a new GPA according to how West Point puts in their algorithm. Okay, first is your GPA and your class rank size. In size, this is your performance in classes compared to your peers. Second is the competitiveness of your high school. Okay, if you go to the most difficult high school in the state and they don't have grade inflation, that's going to be taken into consideration as it should. Third, your course load difficulty. Are you cruising by taking regular classes? Or are you taking AP, IB, dual enrollment, honors, etc.? How much of that versus what's available to you are you taking? And then fourth is your performance in specific classes, your core math and science classes being most important, calculus, pre-calculus, chem with lab, bio with lab, physics with lab. These are incredibly important as well. So that is the 20%. Let's go back to the picture of the whole candidate score. That is the 20% that we're looking at. It's not just your straight GPA. All right. So what is next? After that is community leadership, 30%. Athletic activities. Guys, let's talk about athletic activities for a second. Varsity letters, years as team captain, and years as special honors and awards. Those are the three most pivotal things that they look at to determine your athletic activity score, which is 10% of your overall admission score. So think about that. The more varsity letters you have, the more years as team captain you have, the more years as special honors or award, like in all state, etc., the better. If you're not active in sports, you are shooting yourself in the foot. And this 10%, a lower score in this 10% could actually be the difference in you getting in or not getting in. That's how big of a deal it is. That's why they carve it out as separate and they don't just say resume for 20%. They actually want to look specifically at sports versus the non-athletics or the extracurricular in this case. Okay? You are applying to a academy, West Point, where they say every cadet is an athlete. That's their mantra. If you are not on an intercollegiate Division I sports team or on a club sports team, you will be put on in a cadet company competing against other companies. You will be playing sports and competing. That is central to the experience. So the best predictor of future performance is to look at past performance. And if you are listening to me and you are not involved in sports, you need to look specifically at the varsity sport or club sports in your community to get involved. Next, extracurricular activities. Leadership, leadership, leadership. This is where you can really differentiate yourself. In a 4-year study we did based on who got in and who didn't, check this out. The average number of significant leadership roles for admitted candidates, 4.9. The average number of significant leadership roles for rejected candidates, 1.8. Guys, that is staggering. The resumes of the young people that are getting accepted versus the resumes of the young people that are not getting accepted can sometimes boil down to two words: leadership positions. Okay. Now notice I said significant leadership positions. So anybody can lead. There are leadership positions that matter more than others. Okay. And the two factors are how selective it is and how recognizable it is. So selective. Is it an organization that just takes any warm body, or is there some selectivity to it? Think of it being elected to a student council or elected to a club officer position. From recognizable, think about it like this. Has the admissions board ever heard of it? Is it a national organization like Boy Scouts, or is it something very specific to your neck of the woods that they might have never heard of? There's going to be a little bit more explaining to do. The more recognizable, the more selective, the better. Now, pro tip on this. It's not necessarily like that you have to. It's not a requirement that you necessarily be president, or that as much as it is that you get on the leadership team. You follow me? Become an officer of the club. Be on the executive board. Be a team captain. You don't have to be necessarily go for the top position, strike out, and then get nothing. It's not president or bust. It's more officer or bust. Don't just be a member is the bottom line. If you're going to do it and you're an upperclassman, lead it. If you're going to do it, lead it. That's what we say around here. So what's the bottom line? Get leadership roles. And when given a choice, do so in recognizable and selective organizations. That is the extracurricular part of it. Now, faculty appraisal, that 10% is regarding the 4 recommendation letters that West Point allows you to have. Okay, they're called school official evaluations because they're not a typical recommendation letter on letterhead that they submit in a PDF. Okay, these are online appraisals that they get the school official gets a link, and then they fill out a think of it like a survey. It's an appraisal on you and on your leadership and on your character compared to your peers. All right, and then they have a chance to expand on that and write a little bit of detail in there, and that goes straight to admissions. Now, the 4 that are mandatory. This is unique to West Point in that there are no optional recommendations. They are all mandatory. And the 4 are a math teacher, an English teacher, a chemistry or physics teacher, and a PE teacher. Okay, so math, English, chemistry or physics, and PE. All right. 11th and 12th grade teachers are preferred, but not necessarily mandatory. If you have an issue finding a PE school official, you can also ask a commissioned officer to do the PE teacher recommendation, or a non-commissioned officer, a professor of military science at ROTC, or a JROTC instructor. That will also be spelled out in your application. You can also ask a liaison officer, so your field force rep. You can also ask them, okay, because that comes up often. And if none of those satisfy the requirement, you can ask West Point, your regional admissions officer, for a waiver and ask them for further detail on what to do. A little bit more detail than you need to know at this point, but the bottom line is those are the 4 school official evaluations. Now, the number one problem we see in this area is students not giving their recommenders the tools to be successful. When you approach a school official about doing something for you, don't expect them to care more than you do. This is your dream. So give them your resume, give them a deadline, and give them instructions on next steps. Treat them as someone to impress. After all, they're doing you a favor. So approach them professionally. And the second problem that we see is giving a one-dimensional view of yourself. Okay? So when you think about the 4 to ask, if given a choice, you want those 4 to represent a 360-degree view of who you are so that the West Point can get the best or most complete view of yourself. All right. Now, lastly is, we've discussed the leadership. Now, lastly is the physical aptitude. So let's talk about the CFA. The CFA is 6 events in succession with limited rest in between. And if you fail one event, you fail the whole thing. And listen to this, different from West Point, different to West Point. distinct to West Point from all the other academies, West Point alone requires you to record your push-ups and pull-ups for them to review. And if you don't do the correct technique, they will kick it back and ask you to do it again. Okay? 3 problems that we see with this, the 3 challenges we see with all young students. 1, overconfidence. I'm an athlete. I got this. Probably not. Don't be overconfident. Be humble as you come into this. 6 events in succession, it ain't easy. Okay? Just because you're a football player doesn't mean you're going to have a great shuttle run and do push-ups and sit-ups and then turn around and do a mile run with very little rest. Probably not. All right? So let's get out there, and that leads to the second problem is that they don't do a mock. They don't do a mock CFA. Doing a mock CFA is the greatest way to know where you're at. Not getting a personal trainer necessarily, not even though that can be good and that can be warranted at times, not necessarily going in the weight room and lifting is not going to tell you how well you're doing on the CFA. It's doing the actual test. There is no replacement for that. Okay. And the third is, I was hinting at it earlier, the third problem we see is poor technique. If you practice with poor technique, you should expect you will perform with poor technique. And then at the end, you will get a kickback and you're risking failure. Okay. So practice like you play in game-like conditions with limited rest, exactly as they tell you to do. Get out there and do it the right way and see where you're at and then work on it. And at the end, we have a gift for you that we believe will help you in your journey to West Point. Okay, now that we've covered the framework on how West Point views applicants, the next step is to give you details on the uniqueness of the West Point application process. Okay, so here's a few things to think about. Okay, for the essays, they call them the candidate statements, same thing as essays. West Point has 3 essays. There's a 2,500 character limit, characters, not words, 2,500 characters. Okay, these essays are an invitation to do 2 things. First, expound on your intrinsic motivation to serve and become an officer, become an Army officer. This is essentially getting to the heart at why. Why do you want to come to West Point and be an Army officer? This is a very unique path. Okay, this is not going to the nearby state college or going to private college. This is serving in the military and being a leader for your country. They want to know why. They're getting at the heart. So when you approach this question, here's some few pro tips for you. 1, be personal. Be so personal that this could not be copied onto another person's essay. If I replaced your name at the top with John Smith, would it make just as much sense because you wrote it so generically? It should not be. It should be so personal to you. They're trying to get to know you. So let them do that. Give them a window into who you are. Second, it should be specific to West Point. Your reasons for attending West Point should be specific to West Point. So much so it couldn't be copied on an Army ROTC essay or onto another college essay. You should know why you want to go specifically to West Point. And third, be passionate. You should have an enthusiastic tone. After all, this is your dream. The second thing that they're trying to get at that they're inviting you to do with your candidate statements is an invitation to tell a story. The best way to communicate your personal value is through story. Okay, so we're going to share a framework that we like to use with our clients, and we're going to share it with you. And that is STAR, S-T-A-R, the STAR method. S is situation. It's the background or the setting of the story. It's where you lay the foundation. T is task. It explains the problem to be solved or the challenge to be overcome in the story. 3 is, scroll down here so you can see these. 3 is action. The action steps you took to solve the problem. This should be 70% of the story. This should be where they really get at what you did. All right. And then last is R, the result, the positive outcome of your actions and the lesson learned or the lesson learned. When we read essays, when we evaluate essays, when we edit essays, one of the problems we see is that young people have difficulty telling a story in a concise way. The STAR framework is the greatest way to do just that. Tell a compelling story in a concise manner. Now that we've discussed essays, we need to talk a little bit about interviewing. Interviewing is going to be essential in the West Point application process, and it's incredibly nerve-wracking, rightfully so. You're 17 years old and you're interviewing with a 50-year-old who served 20 years in the military, asking you why you want to serve your country. That's a difficult thing to come up with the words for. When you open up your application, you will receive an assigned field force representative. That person's job is to, along with answering basic questions when needed, their main role is to interview you and give West Point admissions office a report, an evaluation of your character, your leadership, your communication skills, your motivation to serve. It's their boots on ground viewpoint, and it's smart for them to do so, to verify that they're getting the best and the brightest in the community. Most likely this interview will be in person now that COVID is done. Thank goodness. Okay. And the interview score will go to the admissions office and be a critical component. It's not in the whole candidate score, but that does not mean that it's not looked at or important. It will be quantified and be put into your application file, separate from the whole candidate score, still looked at by the admissions board. And we need to say this because in the age of AI and the information age, just because there's a whole candidate score, that does not mean that computers decide whether you get into West Point. No, there are people, okay? There are people that meet weekly and read applications and decide and discuss who gets an appointment, who gets a rejection letter, who gets an offer to a West Point prep school, all right? Or USMAPs, United States Military Academy Prep School. Okay, and after this, we'll also give you a free giveaway. That's our second free giveaway tonight. That will help you prepare for the Field Force Rep interview. It's a Field Force Rep interview quick guide. Okay, the timing of this interview will occur sometime in the fall after you've completed the majority of your application. They're not going to waste their time interviewing you until you've proved you're serious by completing a lot of the application. And the problems we see with this process is not being prepared, following the advice, just be yourself and just winging it. And I got to tell you, a 17-year-old just being themselves is not good enough. Okay, because that usually means immature and unprofessional. Okay, know your story, practice your answers. Also, contrary to other service academies, West Point, typically in the application portal, they not only have your field force rep, or another name for them might be your congressional district coordinator, but they also might have your state coordinator and your regional admissions officer. These are all resources you have if your field force rep is difficult to get a hold of, or if you're having an issue in your portal, such as something showing up as red when it should be green. Okay, so that is the field force rep West Point admissions interview. Now I want to be clear about the admissions deadline if I haven't already. West Point admissions application deadline is January 31st. However, because of rolling admissions, because of LOAs, because of the Dodmer process, this deadline is a distraction, not the goal. You want to get your application in as high quality and as timely as possible. Submitting early and submitting professionally are both important to winning. Okay, so we have discussed the West Point application in a nutshell, as much detail as we can, over 30 minutes. Now we are going to transition to the daunting congressional nomination process, because these two applications run in parallel. You must get your West Point application done, and you also must apply for nominations. It is a federal law, Title 10, Chapter 403, if you want to geek out on with me, that stipulates a nomination is a service academy requirement. And the purpose of the law, way back in the 1800s, even till now, is to make sure academy admits are geographically representative of the country. There's 535 congressional offices, 435 representatives, and 100 senators. The congressional offices can all be different. However, there are common themes which I want to share with you, but their application processes, what essay prompts they have, when they interview, when the deadlines are, how many letters of recommendation they're asking for. Are they asking for a transcript or not? Are they asking for a questionnaire or not? Do they want a photo or not? All those things are up to their discretion, and there's not a standardized process. That makes this, in some ways, the wild, wild west, and we have to really get organized. And that's the problem that we find, is that young people aren't organized with the congressional nomination process because it's an entirely separate process on top of the West Point application and equally important. All right. So that leads us to this. How many nominations can a member of Congress give, and how competitive is it to get a congressional nomination? Let me make this as simple as possible. In any given year, West Point has, members of Congress have 10 nominations per academy per year. So in your congressional district, that congressman can nominate 10 people to West Point in any given year. You want to be one of the top 10. Okay? So now if you take a step back, what is the statistical likelihood of you being one of that 10? Well, it's highly dependent on how many people apply in your district or state. The ones that are the most competitive have the highest military presence. Okay? Meaning that they're sons and daughters of veterans. The more veterans that live in the area, the more children are probably going to want to follow in their parents' footsteps. Okay, so that's a proxy for competitiveness. And also, the higher socioeconomic areas typically have higher performing students, which are more competitive for academies, or West Point in this case, as an example. So higher military presence, if you live in a higher socioeconomic level or have a higher military presence, you are most likely in a competitive district. And there's also one more wrinkle to this. Well, two more wrinkles to this. First is nomination applications ask you to rank order your preferences. Okay, and your preferences list matters because there's 4 academies that require nominations. Coast Guard's the only academy that does not, but the other 4 do. If you put West Point 4th on your list, the chances of you getting it are quite small. In fact, a lot of congressional representatives and senators will only consider your first choice. Some will go all the way down and give you, it depends on the competitiveness of the district. But your preferences list matters, and you should highly consider what you put number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so your statistical likelihood then depends on how many people apply within your district or state and how many people put your number 1 choice as their number 1 choice. And most don't know this, what I'm about to say, but federal law dictates the academies, in West Point in this case, must offer 1 person from each district if they're qualified. There could be more than 1 at the end of the day, but they must offer 1. And almost all congressional districts, usually in any given year, have 1 qualified. There are a few that sometimes don't, but more often than not, there is at least 1 qualified applicant. So the best way to win your nomination and even win the appointment is to win your district. If you win your district, meaning you get number 1, like you're the most highly competitive of those 10 that get the nomination, not only can you get the nomination, but you're in line for an appointment. Okay? So bottom line, win your district, win the appointment, and get organized. Find the deadlines and the requirements in each of the nomination sources. Apply to every nomination source available to make sure you maximize your odds of getting a nomination, because if you don't have a nomination, the only thing on the table is prep school. You cannot directly get into the academy unless you have a nomination. All right. We talked about the congressional nomination process. We talked about the West Point application process and as much detail as we can. Before we get into Q&A, I want to share a success story of someone who got into West Point, and they're near and dear to our heart. We had a client named Omar. Omar and his family, they came to us spring of their junior year. They had a dream. He had a dream to attend West Point, and they were quickly overwhelmed by how much there was to do and how much they did not know. He had a decent GPA. I had a few highlights in his resume. He was involved in sports, but he had huge gaps in leadership in his resume. And his SAT was significantly lacking. We needed to ace this application process while building his candidacy to address these gaps. So the first thing we did with him was a 360 assessment to set goals together and develop a comprehensive plan that we would hold him accountable to, literally a syllabus with meetings in between, consisting of how often he would take the SAT, what leadership roles he would go after, who he would talk to, different decision makers in the local area, etc. Second, sports. We stress the importance of not just being a member of the team, but being a team captain. He eventually got team captain in both sports that he was involved in. Huge win. Third, SAT. He took the SAT 3 more times than he planned to, and he improved his score by 180 points. Also got in a prep program that we referred him to. Fourth, summer programs. We told him about Boys State. We told him about we also told him about Sea Cadets, which he got involved in over the summer. It's an organization similar to Boy Scouts, but for the Navy. There's also Civil Air Patrol for the Air Force. Both great programs. We told him about Sea Cadets. He got involved. 2 more opportunities to impress, build his resume. And fifth, he ran for more leadership positions than he thought he should. He was chosen for VP of DECA, the DECA Club. He became a manager at work. We supported him through all the academy nomination and ROTC applications. And after months of hard work, he earned a congressional nomination to West Point. He earned an Army ROTC scholarship. And then in January, he got the surprise of a lifetime on his application portal, an appointment to West Point. And as a result of our work with him, his mom wrote a nice testimonial in our Google review that you can read later. But we're humbled to be a part of that. And my question to you is, what part of that do you see in your own story, in the beginning of that story? And what is it going to take to make sure the result becomes what you want it to be? So we're ending our time, but I wanted to show you a few things that you're going to get in your inbox at the end of this live Q&A as a reward for showing up tonight. We promised it would be worth your time, and we believe it was, and we want you to give you a few things that you can take with you on the journey. So the first is the Academy Endeavors CFA workout plan. This is to help you get started on fitness preparation. It gives you 2 weeks of workouts that you can just recycle. It gives you 7 steps to success. It gives you a grid that you can fill out your mocks. It shows you the maxes, the mins, and the averages of what you should be going for, so you can set your goals. Okay. It also has links to videos that you can watch so you can use the proper technique. It also has a few links to a few books of some other resources that are great out there on the web. Okay, so that's first. The second thing you're going to get is the Field Force Rep Interview Quick Guide, is to help you understand the basic questions that are asked from the Field Force Rep, so you can begin to get your head around what a good answer looks like. And last is a link to schedule a one-on-one meeting with us. Just listening tonight and taking notes is not going to change your life. Taking action is going to change your life. So take action today. For high school juniors, rising seniors, our program launched. We coach applicants from start to finish through the complex academy application process, all the academies, not just West Point. We only take 30 a year. We're already 50% full, and we have 5 available slots that might change in a couple of days. We have a few that are nearing signing, but we're launching on March 15th. And so we'd love to do that with some of you that believe that the academies are our number one choice and you're all in. Just like we did with Omar a couple years ago. We want to do with you, setting goals, practicing your CFA, holding you accountable, identifying recommenders, writing your congressional nomination essays, preparing for the interviews. I highly recommend you grab a free one-on-one before it fills up. Corey will put it as a link in the chat. It's a link to our Calendly. There you go. Tori's got it in there, so you can grab that. All right, for freshmen and sophomores, our underclassmen program is our fastest growing package, and it coaches freshmen and sophomores through the strategy of preparing to win. We take 40 per year, and those are almost all half full as well. And if the academies are at the top of your list, then underclassmen program is for you. You can sign up at that same link there if you're interested. All right, so we're going to go to live Q&A in a little bit. Please write down your questions, or if you wrote down your questions in the notes, write them in the chat and we'll address them. You can also take yourself off mute and ask for this to be as interactive as possible, but now is where you transition from listening to engaging. Thank you so much for your time tonight, and look forward to meeting some of you on a call. Okay, Rowan has a question. I've taken the ACT twice, and I got a 36 on reading, a 33 on English. I have a 29 in science and a 27 math. I'm going to take it again in April. My question is, should I try at all on the reading and English sections, getting a because you got a 36 and a 33? Should I not really do anything to let myself be fresher in the other categories? So there's a common super score strategy, which is, especially in the ACT, it's perfect for that, is you show up and you focus on one of the subsections at a time. So you already have a 36 on reading. That section you do not need to focus on anymore because the Academy super score, and they will take your 36. You got that locked in. The 33, if you believe that is your best, that also should not be a focus. Your 27 in math is the one that's most vulnerable and should be your biggest focus right now. Okay. So you can really use reading as almost a rest period for yourself, and math be your main focus. What you do in the super scoring strategy, and by the way, disclaimer, we are not SAT and ACT tutors. We refer people out that have that special expertise. However, we work with young people on just the overarching strategy of getting into Academy, and the SAT and ACT is a big part of that. All right. So the ACT, you have the privilege of taking it more times. You've taken it twice. You can take it multiple times more. You can actually take it until December. If you're a junior, Rowan, you can take it until December of your senior year. So we're talking in February of 2024 right now. You can take it probably 5 more times, and you can focus strictly on the math and the science. And if you get those up, even work onto the English. Does that answer your question? Let me know. All right. If that's not helpful, I'll ask a follow-up. Adam asked, how can I stand out in a competitive district? Adam, give me a little bit more detail on where you live, and I might be able to help you with that. Just general area. Okay. So Adam lives in Colorado Springs, and I'm guessing, Adam, are you interested in the Air Force Academy? Okay. So Adam's interested in the Air Force Academy, and he lives in Colorado Springs, which we are all a little bit more anchored to where we live, and therefore it's going to be more competitive. So Adam, your first step, not only in getting organized, is to also to understand what they're asking for. So find out who your representative is. Go to their website. Under constituent services, you can find their application. Find out what they're asking for. That's the first step. That's what we do with our clients. We have a nomination tab in their workbook, and we get really zeroed in on what are they asking for. Believe it or not, this is not a political process. This is more of a merit-based process. Okay, so although it can come down a little bit to relationships, more than anything, it's merit. They're looking for who are the best candidates. So whatever is on that application, those are the things you want to max out. That's the first thing I would do. Okay, and SAT, they're most likely, believe it or not, congressional nomination districts are going to ask for your SAT or ACT. They even have school codes that you can enter in order to submit scores. Okay, so that's going to be part of it. Your essay writing is going to be part of it. Your interviewing is going to be part of it. Your leadership is going to be part of it. All those things that you're doing to get into an academy will double up and also help you with your nomination. The difference is you need to be that much better and that much more active in order to separate yourself in Colorado Springs, because the likelihood is there might be 100 more people from your district than another district, and they might be all putting USAFA #1 just like you are. Okay. First step is getting organized. All right. Afterwards, I think you're on my calendar for later so that we can discuss a little bit in more detail, knowing your resume. We can discuss specific tactical things that you can do. All right. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Henry asked, I took PE freshman year. I'm a 2-time state champ in wrestling. Who should write my PE rec letter? So good question. You might be getting a little bit ahead of yourself because it's only February and you got some time to figure this out. But if your coach is a teacher, you need to verify with your admissions representative. But if a coach is a teacher, then usually they will allow you to use your coach as long as they are a teacher. Okay. In the application, it says coaches are not allowed unless they're PE teachers. So my question to you is if your coach is a PE teacher, then you can do that. All right. And that's the easiest answer. If not, then you go to one of your other backups: commissioned officer, service academy liaison officer, non-commissioned officer, professional military science, or JROTC instructor. Okay. You can also communicate with your West Point admissions representative if you need something waived. We talked about that already. All right. Good question, Henry. W. Wong asked, if you do the CFA at summer seminar at Naval Academy, does West Point still require the video of the push-ups or sit-ups? Good question. So there is an opportunity if you do the CFA at a different academy during summer seminar. West Point and Naval Academy both require you to do the CFA at their summer seminar or their SLE. USAFA does not. It doesn't count because of the elevation issues. CFA historically has not counted, but the other two, yes. And the answer, Mr. Wong, is that it would count. Okay. We have had candidates in the past that they were able to send their CFA over to West Point because it was on the grounds at the academy. It counted. Brandon, how are you doing? Brandon asked, in the 4.8 leadership position stat you referenced earlier, were you counting Boise State in that number? No, I was not. I was not counting Boise State in that. Good question. Okay, keep in mind too, in the leadership positions, our goal with all our clients, and so that would be for you too, is to have 4 or more leadership roles. But keep in mind, the years that you sit in those roles also can matter depending upon the role. So for example, student government. If you were in student government all 4 years, okay, you check not just student government, but you check 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. It matters more how many years you do it than just that you did it, if that makes sense. Okay, so that is also a factor in this, and that's where it gets a little bit complicated. All right, guys, it's almost 10 o'clock Eastern. You guys have been a great audience. What I'm going to do, there's one more thing. One more thing we're going to do. If you are a freshman or sophomore specifically, we found the perfect video for you. It's the Dean of Admissions at West Point. And he was asked by Fox News, okay, and I'm going to share my screen with you. He was asked by Fox News, what should you do? This is Lieutenant Colonel Ransley, the admissions director, provides tips on how to get into West Point. Listen to this.
What was your biggest piece of advice to a family out there that says, hey, I've got an 8th grader and I might want them to go to West Point someday? I've got a bunch of young kids, man, I'd love to see them serve their country. What's your advice?
So for an 8th grader, what I would tell them is they need to understand that what you do in 9th and 10th grade is probably more important than what you do in 12th grade, because you cannot dig yourself out of a hole. You have to set the academic, foundation, because that's 60% of our evaluation. So if you do not set up and take the right classes or not do well in those classes, you're gonna dig a hole that you probably won't be able to.
So the assessment basically starts in 9th grade, academically. As far as what, it's a great tip. So if you're out there, you can maybe coast in 7th and 8th grade, but by 9th grade, you want to be here, you better lock it in.
Absolutely.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Thanks for having us here.
Go Army, beat Navy.
Oh, amen. Go Army, beat Navy all the way. We are totally.
That was a great video. So you guys, he said it right there. 60% of our evaluation is academic. So he's confirming what we just told you tonight is true regarding the whole candidate score. He was referencing the whole candidate score without saying it. And second is, if you are a young person tonight and you are a underclassman, what you do now could even matter more than senior year. So we leave you with that. Hope you guys have a great night. Thanks for listening, and sign up for some of those one-on-ones before they go, because they are going. There's not much left. All right. You guys have a great night.